We're here today to talk about redistricting maps, a little bit of geography for you, but political geography. Redistricting occurs every 10 years following the constitutionally mandated U.S. Census. States are required to redraw congressional and state legislative boundaries based on the census data to assure the one person, one vote directive from the U.S. Supreme Court. This constitutional requirement's purpose is to ensure that each person's voting power carries equal weight across the state and nation by creating districts that are as equal as possible in population. New district lines can be drawn intentionally to decrease voters' power based solely on their political party. Districts have often been gerrymandered to favor the political party in power or a particular incumbent office holders. Simply put, gerrymandering means legislators are choosing their voters instead of voters choosing their legislators. This process inherently undermines the democratic principle that each vote does, in fact, carry equal weight. The League of Women Voters believes that redistricting should be fair, transparent, conducted with full public input. The League of Women Voters U.S. national program, People-Powered Fair Maps, advocates for redistricting processes that eliminate partisan and racial gerrymandering nationwide. So here to talk to you today is Cindy Hine and Susan Perkins Weston. Cindy is a member of the League of Women Voters Board of Directors and Redistricting Committee. She serves as a legislative liaison for the League, and she lives in Lexington. Susan is an attorney and independent education policy analyst, a member of the League of Women Voters Board of Directors as well, and map developer for the Redistricting Committee, and she resides in Danville. So I'll go ahead and let you all take it away.
Thank you, Professor Dunman, and good afternoon. Delighted to know that you have students there in your audience. I'm Cindy Hine, and as Professor Dunman said, I'm a member of the League and a member of the Redistricting Committee. I'm going to run through some basics, reiterate some of the things Professor Dunman said, and then Susan Perkins Weston, my colleague, is going to go over some maps with you, current maps, and then maps that we have drawn that we think are fair and logical and make sense. And one of the big things we're going to be asking of you is that you think about these maps and provide feedback to us. And Professor Dunman will help share your comments and questions as we move along. Susan, let's go to the first slide. So as Professor Dunman said, after every 10-year census, legislators are tasked with redrawing the boundaries for congressional and state legislative districts. And the 2022 census that was just released rather late in September will allow us to redistrict our 6 congressional seats, our 38 Kentucky Senate seats, and our 100 Kentucky House seats. And then that data will also be used for a number of local districts, city, county, school boards, judicial, that kind of thing. One of the big questions that we do not have a firm answer to is when will this actually happen? Because the census data was delayed, and that of course was because of all the challenges with COVID, legislators have had less time than usual to do this work. It is possible that the governor could call a special legislative session this fall and that the work could be done this fall. But we're hearing more and more, and as it gets later in the year, more and more of a sense that this will not happen. One of the challenges with waiting until January is that the filing deadline for candidates, which begins in early November, ends January 7th. And candidates cannot very well file for office if they don't know what district they live in and what district they might represent. So our sense is if they decide to do it early in January, they could push that filing deadline back and give themselves an extra week or two to get the work done. The other possibility is that they could do it later in the legislative session, which goes until mid-April, and have the effect of the new boundaries available for the 2024 elections. In other words, have the new boundaries and the new districts in effect for 2024. That would mean we would go another 2 years until people would have the effect of one person, one vote. And that is a problem. So bottom line is we don't know when the legislators are going to act, but it will be within the next couple of months. Now, redistricting can make it easier or harder for voters to learn about candidates. And it can also make it easier or harder for candidates to campaign in their districts and stay in touch with their constituents. It can also make it easier or harder for citizens to communicate with their representatives, and vice versa, for representatives to communicate with their constituents. Many legislators go to local town meetings, they go to local gatherings, they belong to local rotaries or civic clubs. If they live a long way away, it makes it more difficult for them. And you'll see in some of our Senate maps in particular in a few minutes why we're concerned about that for Kentucky. Redistricting can also make it easier or harder for parties to compete with each other. If districts are gerrymandered so that they're safe for one party or another, then you don't have much competition in elections. It can also make it easier or harder for racial minorities to elect the candidates they prefer. And it can also make it easier or harder for regions within a state to get their distinctive interests considered. Why should we care? Well, for one thing, once these district lines are in place, they will be in place for 10 years. So the district's boundaries that are set in the next couple of months will be in effect until the 2030 census data is available. We believe, as Professor Denman suggested, that voters should elect their representatives rather than elected officials choosing the people who will vote for them. And we know that that has happened. Both parties are guilty. It's sort of a natural instinct to want to protect your power, protect your own. But we think that that's not the democratic process. Another reason that this is an important issue is that in safe districts, elected officials don't have to compromise. Officials are elected, they feel like it's safe, they don't have to worry about competing because they've got a good solid set of voters who they're pretty sure will vote for them. The other thing that happens in safe districts when gerrymandering has occurred is that the elected officials are chosen frequently in the primary election instead of the general election. So they happen in the primaries when the parties select their candidate. So if you've got a really safe district, one party is going to choose the candidate for their party in that race, and that generally is the person who is elected. So a smaller number of people are choosing that official, and a lot of people are just left out, including independent voters who are not registered as a Democrat or a Republican. And then poorly drawn lines can lead to costly lawsuits. And that happened in 2012. Both the House and the Senate were sued for the way their lines were drawn. The courts found in favor of the plaintiffs, and the legislature had to go back to the drawing board. So the lines that you see in the current maps in just a few minutes were drawn in 2013. Now, the best approach in terms of the league's thinking is an independent redistricting commission. There are a number of states across the country that have commissions that actually draw the lines and make the final decisions. These commissions are appointed or elected in a variety of ways in attempts to try to make them independent of one or other party's political influence. In Kentucky, we could not have an independent commission without a constitutional amendment. And we believe that that is just not feasible in this state with the current legislative control. And actually, neither party, when they're in control, wants an independent commission. They usually want to do it themselves. The next best possibility is an advisory commission. This we recommended to the legislature in 2020 and 2021, and it was rejected. An advisory commission is again a group of people elected or selected, appointed, trying to be as impartial as possible or as balanced as possible. They would have held hearings, they would have listened to the public, they would have looked at the data, and they would have drawn maps that they would have recommended to the legislature. But with an advisory commission, the legislature still has the bottom line authority to determine what the boundaries look like. And then the best practice, since the advisory commission was rejected, is public hearings and public input. We proposed House Joint Resolution 61. That too was rejected. That would have called for public hearings, meetings across the state, and plenty of opportunity for the public to comment and have input before the maps, before the voting happened in the maps. That also was rejected, which is one of the reasons why the league is out across the state talking about explaining redistricting, why it's important, and sharing some proposed maps that we are seeking comment on. So we have drawn draft maps specifically to inform citizens like you about what fairer, simpler maps could look like, to advocate for fair and simpler and more logical maps, but also to gather input so that the draft maps that we show you will be revised using the input we're gathering at all of these events. And we will develop, or I should say Susan will develop, because she is our map drawer. She will create what we're going to call our recommended maps, a final set of maps that we will share with the legislature later this fall. Our whole purpose is to try to open up the process. In most cases in the past, the drawing of maps has happened behind closed doors. We've heard stories of legislators being taken into a back room and asked, which neighborhood would you like to have in your district? And if they are favored legislators, they might get those districts. We'd like that not to happen this time. We'd like the process to be more open, more transparent, and we certainly would like to see maps before legislators vote on them. Now, Susan followed the rules that the legislature will follow. These are required. First, as Professor Denman suggested, is the one person, one vote. Districts are to be as equal in population as possible so that every citizen is fairly represented across the country. The United States congressional seats must be very, very close to perfectly equal. And the Kentucky House and Senate seats must be within 5% of perfectly equal size. That gets tricky with some of the other rules that I'll tell you about in a minute. The second is opportunity. Redistricting must provide districts of opportunity so that minority voters have an opportunity to choose representatives who will represent them and their values and their thinking. And then the third rule, and this is in the Kentucky Constitution, is that Kentucky Senate and House districts must not divide counties unless it's absolutely necessary to meet the one person, one vote population numbers. That gets very tricky and very difficult, and Susan will describe several situations in just a few minutes where that was a real challenge. Now we followed, next slide, or Susan followed some additional goals. One, we tried to make the districts more compact, and you will see some very long, skinny, strange looking districts in just a few minutes. The second thing we tried to do is in every county have a district within the county that included the county seat. We were able to do that most of the time, and in some cases that was difficult. But there are a number of counties in the state, including Pike County, by the way, in Eastern Kentucky, where the county was divided into 4 or 5 different districts. And as it turns out, none of the representatives who represent Pike County live in Pike County. They live in the surrounding counties that were divided. to make up the districts in that region. So we tried to keep the county seats together so that the county seat wasn't divided, and the district had a representative who was elected who actually lived in the county. And then Susan paid absolutely no attention to incumbents and where they live. So we avoided trying to bias the districts based on any knowledge of where legislators lived or didn't live. And that Susan did very nicely. Now, one of the challenges that those creating the maps will face is the changes in population. In this map, the blue counties represent districts that have lost population. And the deeper the color, the deeper the loss, the greater the loss. The red or pink districts, or counties, all gained population. The deeper the red, the greater the gain. So you can see how the Golden Triangle has gained quite a bit of population. Along Interstate 64, cross through here, and then up and down I-65 and the I-75 corridor, there's been quite a bit of gain. Eastern Kentucky is going to be challenged because those districts are going to get larger in geographic size in order to accommodate the fewer numbers of people who live in those areas. And the same is true in Western Kentucky. Susan, I'm going to turn it over to you now to talk through the maps. And if you have questions, you might jot them down, get them to Professor Denham, and we will see if we can't be sure to answer or respond to your questions and comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Cindy. I'm very glad to be here. I'm going to say really early, if anybody in the audience is from Boyd County, I especially covet your questions, and after a while it will be clear why that particular location is on my mind. So here is the state's current congressional map showing our 6 congressional districts. I recommend that you stare at it for a minute and think, what looks odd? What might be worth a question? And I'll let you do that, and then I'll volunteer my answers after you've stared at it for a bit. To me, I think it's the 2 yellow districts that are definitely the oddest things on this map. The first district down in the west starts at the Mississippi and runs along the Tennessee border all the way up to the absolute middle of the state. I'm in Danville, Kentucky, which at one time was the center of the state. And I live 10 miles from the first district. It's ridiculous as a stretch for people. We're pretty sure that what's going on there is an attempt to keep Bowling Green in Warren County and Owensboro in Daviess County in the same congressional district. And if you put those 2 in a district in the middle of the state, the West just doesn't have enough people to avoid needing that whole tail that runs into the middle of the state. The other district that looks awfully stretched out is the 4th district up in the north, running all the way from the outer parts of Jefferson County and Louisville all the way to Ashland, but doing it on a very skinny basis. So it's got a sort of snaky look to it to go with the dragon with the tail look of the Western district. This is where the puzzle comes in. There are a small number of counties divided to make this happen. With congressional districts, you don't have a don't divide counties rule. But this one looks like it stretches people out more than is definitely necessary. So having given you that warm up about congressional districts, I'll share again how much we want your input. One way you can get us the input is to log into this tinyurl.com address for LWV maps. And that'll put you in a survey that'll compile your thoughts. We do ask for your email address, but we promise we're not going to use that to send you any emails. It's an identifier. And then there's space for you to comment on these congressional maps, then the Senate maps, then the House maps. We would love to have your thoughts coming in that way. You can do that starting now if you want. Some other options, you can use the Q&A function during the forum. In this case, for those of you in person, Professor Dunman is the Q&A function. You can email us notes at info@lwvky.org. Or if you want to look at the maps later on, you can do that and then get us notes anytime through November 15, which is when I'm planning to start work on revising the maps. We do have an interesting puzzle. I guess all the maps we're going to see tonight, you can also see from our website, so you could get copies and study them on your own computer screen or print them out. And that address is lwvky.org. We're sharing that in a chat function, but that doesn't help if you're in person. But having shown you that, here's our attempt to redo the maps using 2020 numbers. And we started out with a clear goal that the Western District be really Western and not have that long tail. And we think we got that worked out. You get a coherent district if you push Owensboro back into the West. Owensboro people may think that was a bad idea, but it works for the map as a whole. Then you have a yellow Southern District that's pretty coherent and goes all the way down to the Tennessee border. And the blue Northern District can be shorter and thicker. It's more like a pudgy district than like a snake district now. And the Eastern District, still all Appalachian counties. Feels to me like what we managed to do was rotate it on a clock face. So it used to run sort of from 8 o'clock to 2 o'clock, and now it runs from 7 o'clock to 1 o'clock. But that's the big shift. I'll show you the divided counties in this one. Jefferson County is too large to be a congressional district. There are about 780,000 people there, and a district needs about 750,000. So when we move to on here, this is a zoom in on the congressional districts that include Jefferson County and Louisville. Jefferson County has 780,000 people, which is about 30,000 more than can be in a congressional district. So some part of Louisville has to be pulled off into other districts. And in my effort, what I ended up with is adding a small southwest portion to the Southern District and a small northeastern portion to the Northern District. For anybody who is used to driving into Louisville, yes, the reason there's a tidy right angle in that little blue corner is you're looking at the line that is I-64 and the line that is the Snyder Expressway. And where I could, I tried using maps that way, using the roads, because they function sort of like rivers as boundaries now. It's easy if voters are trying to tell each other where the district is, if it's something they're all really familiar with navigating around and through. 3 other counties needed division to make the maps come out the right size. So Grayson County in the west, and Harrison County to the north, and Montgomery County closest to Morehead were the 3 others that had to be divided up a little bit to end up with those quite near to equal congressional districts. I will mention here the districts as we have drawn them are proof that these can be made almost perfectly equal. They aren't quite there because of a software glitch. So the draft maps we're sharing today were drawn in the districtr.org software, which is free and lovely and online and produces lovely maps in color, but it's based on census block groups rather than single census blocks. And that got me in some positions where if I moved the last 200 people from the district that was too large, it made it too small. When we get to the recommended maps, we will use Maptitude, which is state of the art and what the legislature itself uses, and we'll be able to get really, really, really close to the required equal districts. But knowing that at some point someone may pull up the maps and look at the numbers for themselves, I will say, I'm within a couple of hundred. I'd like to be within 20 on getting to equal sizes. I'll now move us on to having a look at the Kentucky House. This is a good map for just getting an impression of there are a lot of districts, but pretty hard to see what's going on in the districts. So I'm going to show you a couple of close-ups designed to show you how these rules have been working for people. Cindy had mentioned Pike County. Here are the districts that include Pike County, shown in 4 different colors. And you can kind of see the wiggles and the twists. The word gerrymander is based on the word salamander. And these sure look like some wiggly reptiles in how they were drawn. I think these are difficult for citizens to keep track of. And you can see how it could turn out that nobody in any of those districts, nobody elected in any of those districts would be someone who actually lives in Pike County. So it's an example of how they cut things up. In general, what goes on in Kentucky, the rule against dividing counties means the game is played by putting together combinations of smaller counties, trying to get to the right size. And if you can't get there, you go find one of the big districts that has to be divided. There were about 24 of them when these maps were drawn. And you use those as piggy banks and you pull off pieces of them to make the other districts work. Large counties don't care for this arrangement, but the Supreme Court made a, I think, reasonable argument for doing it this way. I do want to mention, though it's some distance from you, there were 2 places where a county had to be divided even though it wasn't too big. Bell County caused one of these problems. Bell is a sort of medium-sized district. It's too small, medium-sized county, pardon me. It's too small to be its own House district, but it's too large to be combined with any district next to it to make a district. And that's the situation where even though a county isn't over the district size, it still has to be divided. In this version, I think this is a kind of ugly version of how to do the division. And it's Harlan that got divided, even though it's Bell that was where the numerical problem started out. Just to give you another example of this really dividing people up a whole lot, here's what happened to Laurel and Pulaski, who between them are connected with an amazing number of counties, all of them making withdrawals from those 2 large counties as though they were piggy banks. Now I'll try to show you how we worked on it. Our maps are done in 7 regions to make it easy to show you bigger pictures of them. And for this discussion, we're going to focus just on 2. We'll be looking mainly at the Eastern District, but we'll also look at the Northern District, since that's not at all far from Morehead. If you want to see the full set of maps, again, those are available at our website, which is lwvky.org. And that's another place you could share comments. So I showed you Pike County and how it's split up. Here's where I ended up working on dealing with the same puzzle this time. And I think it's easier on voters. So you have a green district that includes Pikeville and a whole lot of the county. And then you have 2 other districts, one with Johnson and Martin and another with Floyd. And each of those other districts has a part of Pike County, but it's the part that had to be out of Pike County because of Pike's population. It's a smaller map. It doesn't stretch as far. It's easier to imagine driving the length of it. I want to show you a couple of other divisions in the Eastern map. Bell County is still too small to be its own district and too large to combine with any other adjacent district. And it's still forcing some place to be divided, and Harlan still made sense. But I worked in doing this to make the district simpler and not have there be a lot of wiggles for people to remember to understand where they are. And this also involved combining with more counties. Now for the great ugly. This is my least favorite thing that I have done in the map, and this is why I asked about Ashland and Boyd County. Boyd County is big enough that it has to be divided, but it's next to some other counties that are like Bell and really need a bite from somebody. And I spent 5, 6, 7 hours trying to find an alternative to cutting Boyd up about like this, and I couldn't find one. So in this version, There's a bite of Boyd County that went with Greenup. There's a bite that went with Lawrence, and there's a bite that went with Carter and Lewis. And there's no district that belongs to Boyd County. And Ashland, I think I have the formal boundaries of Ashland all in one district. It's the one shared with Lawrence County, which is quite a distance for driving. I don't like this. I could not find another way to do it. If someone sends me a suggestion that can work, I will jump up and down with delight, because I think this is bad for citizens who are used to working together to be split up this way. Just a close up further of how split up that county is. I don't like it. I am hunting for another solution. I will mention in the drawing of the map, it was actually Rowan that was driving me to it. Finding one or two other counties that could go with Rowan was terribly hard. And the two little small change counties that could have made a Rowan County district work were Elliott and Robertson. But if I took Robertson, I was going to hit, I can't make a district up to the river. This is called when you do stuff that you know isn't good for the most affected people. And I couldn't find a way to change that fit the legal rules. Not fun, worst of the process. In the Eastern District, there are 4 other districts I made. For Rowan County, it's a district combined with Elliott and Fleming, and then a district for Bath, Menifee, and Montgomery, and one for Breathitt, McGoffin, Morgan, and Wolf, and one for Leslie, Owsley, and Perry. These are, I think, moderately coherent. They're definitely contiguous, and I think have workable roads for people to work together. And then here's that northern region I mentioned to give you a first look at 2 fairly coherent districts that each involve 4 counties being combined, and 2 districts that take bites out of the northern counties of Boone and Kenton, but also include other counties. And then I'll show you a close-up of what happens all the way north. So in this version of the map, Boone County, which is a big county, has 2 districts that are entirely for Boone and shares one with Kenton and shares another with just Gallatin and Grant. Kenton County has 3 districts that are entirely inside of Kenton, shares one with Boone and shares one with Bracken and Pendleton. And Campbell County in the most recent census is the right size to just be split into 2 parts. Those 2 districts have very similar population, the purple and the green, but as you can see, very different total size in terms of area. That's an attempt to make house maps work better.
Susan,
Yes.
would you go back to that next? There's a question here. Could you take the western part of the purple? Now, let's see, I'm not sure how far back this needs to go.
It sounds like it's a Boyd question.
Okay. Could you take the western part of the purple and add to blue, and then keep Ashland in the purple, then move the green bite to the western part of the county?
Thank you.
So
That tentatively sounds like that would be better in terms of people in the Ashland area feeling like they were working with familiar partners. So yes, that is a helpful idea for those priorities, and I think it's possible. Cindy, I hope you have that nicely written down.
We'll record it.
Good. Right. That is definitely worth trying. And hooray, somebody thinking about how this can work. I appreciate that idea, and I'll try it out. I will give another moment in case people want to pop up more questions and give you the ways that you can, the other ways that you can give us input. I can see Professor Dunman being lively.
Yeah, I just commented that it's nice to see Lewis County taken out of Rowan's district. That's just my personal view, but it's nice to see they find their own way.
Yeah, there's for me, there's a recurring problem of trying not to draw lines that fit how I'd like my county to be handled. And I'm pleased with how I did it in 2 out of 3. And on the Senate map, I feel guilty because I like where my county landed. So I made myself check extra that the other counties were being well served in the whole region and that there wasn't another option that would work as well. This is the state Senate map. This is the map we're living with currently. First round looking at this map, if you've seen any of the districts that got the most criticism the last time in other states, there are a set that look like Disney characters or something. A real mess, deeply confusing. None of these districts look that far gone, but a recurring issue is the very long, skinny ones, especially in Eastern Kentucky, the set that start pretty much on the Tennessee line and run just about up to the Ohio River. They really do look like somebody had a string of pearls and then added one more and then added one more. And we have heard a couple of reports that that's pretty much what did happen in the last redistricting, that districts that people had represented before were kept intact, plus add a county on at one end. Those are exactly the kind of district where we think it's really hard on citizens. It's hard to campaign. It's hard to go to campaign events. It's hard to make the drive to go see your own representative. It's hard for your representative to show up at your public events, your senator, I mean. So that's the way the current map was put together. In our attempt, we're going for something simpler, and in just this view, you can get a sense of more like blobs and less like snakes, closer to holding things together. We did do this map in 2 parts so you could see each part bigger. So these are the main districts of the East in combinations aiming to get folks closer together with some better chance of campaigning. I suspect that I've missed some weaknesses in roads and routes that people can travel on. But there again, that's exactly where input from people who know the region would be helpful. Rowan County in this version is in the yellow district at the north with a whole set of northern Kentucky counties. And across most of the eastern part of the state, there were no counties that had to be divided, which is good because there were no counties that were allowed to be divided if there was a way to avoid it. There simply weren't counties that were bigger than the 118,000 needed size. I'll show you the other 2 divisions here. Fayette County with Lexington had to be divided. This is not a surprise, it's the state's 2nd largest county. But aim to make the division fairly simple. So Fayette has 2 Senate districts that are entirely in the county and 2 others, each of which is shared with an adjacent county. That was an attempt to make things relatively simple for folks in that region, and also for the folks who are not in Fayette County, but are included in a district that has Fayette County. It gives them a fairly easy route to be connecting with the people who represent them. And in northern Kentucky, both Kenton and Boone have to be divided at their current size, but each of them had a coherent district of their own. And then both Boone and Kenton share with a set of northwestern districts. And Campbell wasn't big enough, so Campbell also has a bite out of Kenton. Kenton kind of has to get chewed up because it's the 3rd largest county in the state. Oh, I'm pausing. It's possible Warren is now bigger. Kenton was the 3rd county that had to be divided before. But those are the places where we made splits. I'm going to go back and put this up for a second and see if there are more questions. If not, I'm going to go ahead and move on. Having shown that much, to say again how much we would love input from anyone who's been in the audience or anybody viewing the recording. And there are these multiple ways you can get us your thoughts. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Cindy when she's ready.
Thank you, Susan. again, we really are seeking your thoughts and ideas about these maps. I have a feeling you as students at Morehead don't necessarily live in Rowan County. You may live in surrounding counties, and we'd especially appreciate your thoughts about that. So if we ask legislators, ask what legislators could do to make this process a fair process, they could seek citizen input beyond the 1 or 2 committee meetings that they will hold prior to voting on these bills. We'd love to see them offer opportunities with emails. Maptitude has a process where you can share the maps and people can comment. So we'd like to see the legislature ask for our opinion and ask what the citizens think. We'd also like them to share the maps before they vote. There has been a tendency in the last couple of sessions for very big, important bills to slip through very quickly without much opportunity for the public to read or absorb what those bills say, or how, and in this case, what the maps would look like. So we're asking that they share those maps much further ahead of time before they actually vote. And then we'd love to see broad support of those maps, bipartisan support. That's a little tricky in this particular political climate, but if they were to share the maps, they could be seeking input from their fellow legislators across the aisle, and that would be a good thing. Next, Susan. So then ways that you can help. We're asking citizens to let legislators know that we are watching what they're doing and that we care about what they're doing. And so we're asking folks to call their legislators or email them. You can call the 800 line, and that is an easy way to leave messages for legislators. If you're new to the area and you aren't sure who represents you right now, the people at the 800 line can help you figure that out. And you could just leave a message, just say, we're concerned about the redistricting process. Please let us see the maps before you vote. Please make this a more transparent process. Then the second thing you could do is sign the people-powered Fair Maps petition. If you've got your phone with you right now, if you Google or put in your browser lwvky.org, you will come to our homepage, and on that homepage, there is a petition. If you open that up, it will take you about 30 seconds to fill that in and sign the petition. And that petition is asking legislators for an open and transparent process with opportunities for public input. And if you've got your phones, I'd encourage you to do that right now. The next thing you could do is encourage your friends and those who were not here today to watch one of the Fair Maps forums at our website. All 9 of the forums that we have conducted, the public forums, have been recorded or will be recorded. This one's being recorded now and will be online and available for the public to see. And also that feedback form is at lwvky.org, and people could study those maps and give us, and we'd love it if they would provide input for us. And then encourage your friends and others to do all of these things. Call legislators, sign the petition, and attend a forum, pay attention, and provide feedback. You can reach us and provide feedback at any of these ways. If you have questions for us or other comments, we'd welcome that. You can email us at info@lwvky.org. You can call us at the 502-875-6481 number. You could go to our website and leave feedback on our feedback forms. And then you can also go to the tiny URL link That feedback form will be there and available through November 15th. The QR code goes to our League of Women Voters of Kentucky Outreach Circle, which is a program, a process that allows people to quickly find out what we're doing, what meetings we're having, register for events. It also lists our feedback form, our link to the maps, and our link to the petition. And if you're interested in the kind of work that the League does, that's a good way to learn and to stay engaged. As a reminder, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization. We are comprised of men and women. We are not just women, as some people think. And we do not support or oppose political candidates or political parties, but we do oppose or support political issues. We study issues, we work to come to consensus on what we agree to and can support or oppose, and then we advocate for those issues. We're primarily about making democracy work, engaging citizens in the processes and helping inform and educate citizens about issues that are going on. And of course, that's exactly what we're doing with these Fair Maps forums. I'm going to pause. Joe, are there questions or comments from the audience? We'd love to hear from the students.
First, you're going to have to hear from me.
right.
Sorry. When we initially lost audio, Susan was talking about the current congressional House map, and we did not hear her explanation about her proposed congressional House map. Is there a way she can go back to that and kind of run us through that again? I'd like to hear about that.
Sure.
Yeah, give me just, I'm booting myself back up. All right. If you get seasick, close your eyes for a second. All right, so here's the current congressional, nope, I'll go back. Give you a, why is it, oh, I know what I did. There we are. Here's the current congressional map, including some awfully long stretched out districts, and especially including in the west and along the southern border, a very long yellow congressional district that is probably designed to accommodate having that pink second district include both Warren County with Bowling Green and Davies County with Owensboro. Davies County and Owensboro have a lot in common. I can understand why they'd want to be in a shared district, but if they're in the shared district, the west is too small and you have to go somewhere, and really the only place to go to get more people is to do exactly what this district does, running along the Tennessee border all the way to the middle of the state. And at that point, you could either go north as this district does, or you might have been able to go west and not go as far east and not go as far north, but it's a mess. And then the fourth district in the north of the state is an awfully long, snaky looking district. Then I'll show you our alternative. Using the 2020 numbers, we really think it could be simpler. The biggest shift really is putting Davies County and Owensboro in the Western District, after which the southern yellow district there quickly becomes pretty coherent. It can run up to Jefferson County and down to the Tennessee border, and with a fairly coherent line out to where it touches the Eastern and the Central District. Up in the north, we switched from yellow to blue to show that district. And instead of having it run all the way to Ashland, it can be not nearly as long and considerably plumper and wider. We think that would be an easier place for people to campaign. And then to round out the map, the purple district, which I was thinking of consciously as an Appalachian district to reflect that community of interest. There's still a district. It's not quite the same as the current fifth. It's a little bit like if you were looking at the face of a clock, the district used to run sort of from 2 to 8, and it got turned a bit so that now it runs sort of from 1 to 7. And then there's a coherent Lexington.
Susan, can I ask you, where's Pulaski County? Is it the large yellow one on the end of that middle district?
Yeah, yes, it's the one, it's the one that looks sort of like it's a square standing on its side.
That would be very interesting because that's where Hal Rogers lives. And so Rowan County would be in a different district. Very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that is the implication of doing it this way. If you don't do it that way, the northern district, the one that includes Boone and Kenton and Campbell counties, pretty much has to run all the way over to Ashland. I think that's the trade-off. Whereas in this version, you've got a whole set of counties that are all but one of them west of I-75. In this, pardon me, has all but the districts that are west. Blink, blink. This is what I get for going back after I've prepped. In this version, I-75 is very close to that eastern southern boundary. Whitley County is in the eastern district, and somebody would have to cross I-75 to get there. But it's fundamentally a coherent district in relation to the big other boundaries, I think. And yes, that's a disruptive feature. I have meticulously not looked up anybody I displaced in drawing these maps in terms of incumbents. But I do actually know that Representative Rogers is not in the Eastern District, Representative Lewis is not in the Northern District, and Representative Comer is not in the Western District. I didn't do it on purpose, but I did eventually notice and blink hard. And I've been asked repeatedly, would I try redrawing the districts, either to put Pulaski in the east or to put Lewis in the north? And I keep refusing because we said we wouldn't think about incumbents, and I'm trying really not to go back and do that unless there's another reason besides incumbents. But those are the main pieces. I'll show you the two follow-up maps here. This is the Jefferson County division. Jefferson is too big to be its own district. So 2 bytes taken out of there. And then 3 other counties with bytes taken out of them. These are Grayson's county seat is Litchfield. Harrison County, sort of to the north, includes Cynthiana. And Montgomery County, which is divided there, is where Mount Sterling is for people who are more used to noticing highway exits or actually driving through the towns.
Susan, would you go back to the full map and mention that you checked on which counties were considered part of the Appalachian?
Yes, that was purposeful. Pulling, and I'm relying on the Appalachian Regional Commission to get a concept of what counts. And all of these count, it's not all of the districts, counties that are considered Appalachian, because that stretches noticeably further west. But I was aiming for, at least in that understanding of what counts as Appalachian Kentucky, that this district was definitely oriented toward that part of our community.
I polled the audience and we don't have any questions at the moment.
All right. Thank you. And thank you for your stick-to-itiveness as this got complicated.
Thank you for everyone for participating. We still would love your feedback if you want to dig into these maps online and send us feedback. We'd appreciate that. And feel free to share this information with friends and family and fellow students. And have a good evening.
Thank you all very much. It was a pleasure. You're welcome. And thank you all to the audience for being here. I appreciate it.